2 months ago, the Boston Celtics were being dismissed, written off. No Jayson Tatum, no reliable center, a roster that looked stripped of its identity. Around the league, the narrative was simple. This team was supposed to survive, not compete. But reality had other plans. Fast forward to now, and Boston sits among the top teams in the Eastern Conference. 3rd place, big win, consistent responses under pressure. Neemias Queta stepped into moments no one expected. Jordan Walsh showed growth when the margin for error was thin. The Celtics did not just stay alive, they adapted. But here is where the tension begins. As solid as those performances have been, the center position still feels temporary, patchwork, functional, but fragile. And when the playoffs arrive, fragile becomes exposed. The question is not whether Boston is good enough today. The question is whether this version can survive a 7-game series against elite size. That is where a new idea enters the conversation. Quietly at first, then louder. Cal Durrett from Hoops Habit put a name on the table. Miles Turner, a center earning $108 million, still in his prime, under contract for multiple seasons. A rare profile in today's NBA. A big who protects the rim and stretches the floor. Durrett's argument is simple and hard to ignore. There are very few players who can block close to 2 shots per game and still hit 2 3-pointers a night. Turner is one of them. At 29 years old, he fits a timeline that does not disrupt Boston's long-term plans. Yes, the contract is heavy, slightly above market, some would say, but heavy contracts are often the price of stability. And then came the trade framework that raised eyebrows. Anthony Simons, 2 first-round selections in exchange for Turner. At first glance, it feels aggressive, risky, even uncomfortable. Simons is explosive, a scorer who can heat up quickly. But the reality around Boston has been clear for a while. The expectation inside league circles is that Simons was never meant to be a long-term piece. His contract provided flexibility, financial breathing room, not permanence. Now shift the lens to Milwaukee. Without Damian Lillard, the Bucks are searching for perimeter scoring. Simons learned directly from Lillard. His shooting fits perfectly next to Giannis Antetokounmpo. And with most of Milwaukee's future picks tied up in swaps, adding real draft capital becomes valuable. Suddenly, this is no longer a one-sided idea. For Boston, Turner brings defensive versatility, spacing, and playoff reliability. He fits Joe Mazzulla's system naturally. Drop coverage when needed, switch when required, space the floor without hesitation. What if the very thing Boston is watching closely is also slipping further out of reach? Right now, the Celtics are evaluating every possible path to stabilize the center position, quietly, carefully. And Ivica Zubac has been one of those names that keeps coming back in internal conversation. But performances like the one he just delivered are changing the entire equation. On Thursday night, the Clippers lost by 2 points, but Zubac dominated the game. 33 points, 7 rebounds, 2 blocks, near perfect efficiency, 13 makes on 14 shots. That is not just a good night, that is a statement, and statements have consequences. Every game like that does 2 things at once. It raises his value, and it strengthens the Clippers' resolve to keep him. For Boston, neither scenario is favorable. Either Los Angeles pulls him completely off the market, or the price becomes far heavier than expected. This is where the pressure starts to build. Zubac is not a short-term solution. Last season, he was discussed as an all-NBA level center. He earned a spot on the all-defensive second team. For 2 straight years, he has been one of the most reliable interior defenders in the league. Adding that kind of presence would not just help Boston survive the playoff, it would reshape their ceiling. With a center like Zubac, the Celtics shift from being a solid postseason team to a real finals threat. That is not exaggeration. That is roster math. And the impact would extend beyond this season. Zubac is under contract for multiple years. That matters. Jayson Tatum will return. Jaylen Brown is in his prime. Boston is not just building for April. They are planning for multiple title runs. A stable, high-level center changes everything about how those windows look. The most realistic path for Boston involves Anthony Simons and draft capital. That part is clear. The bigger question is on the other side of the deal. Would the Clippers even consider it? Yes, they could use more shot creation next to James Harden, But moving your starting center to fix that problem is rarely the first choice, especially when that center is playing some of the best basketball of his career. Still, there is another layer to this story that cannot be ignored. Los Angeles has struggled. Their record sits far below expectation. If that trend continues, difficult conversations will follow. At some point, teams stop worrying about fit and start worrying about direction, and even without control of their own first-round pick, what if the Celtics are closer to a major decision than they are willing to admit? Boston has been one of the quiet surprises of this NBA season. 15 wins, 10 losses. All of that without Jayson Tatum on the floor, and after losing key pieces during the summer. For many around the league, this was supposed to be a transition year. Instead, the Celtics are staying relevant, competing, forcing people to pay attention. But that raises the real question everyone inside the organization is asking. Is this team actually good enough to challenge the Eastern Conference elite? There is growing belief that Tatum will return at some point this season. And if that happens, Boston's posture changes immediately. A team that was supposed to wait suddenly has a reason to push forward. That is why the front office is closely monitoring the trade market, especially as the deadline approaches. One name keeps surfacing: Ivica Zubac. After saying goodbye to Kristaps Porzingis and Al Horford, Boston has a clear hole in the front court. Neemias Queta has exceeded expectations as a starter. He competes, he brings energy. But when the conversation shifts to playoff basketball, the margin for error shrinks fast, and that is where Zubac enters the discussion. He is producing 16.6 points per game, 11.4 rebounds, over 61% shooting from the field, nearly 33 minutes a night. At 28 years old, he is in the middle of his prime and offers something Boston lacks: size, strength, interior defense that holds up when possessions slow down. On paper, the fit makes sense, but then came the news that complicates everything. According to reports around the league, the Clippers' asking price for Zubac is steep, very steep. Multiple teams have reached out, and the early indication is that Los Angeles would demand at least 2 first-round picks just to start the conversation. That matters a lot. The Celtics have a long-standing reputation. They do not give away draft capital easily. They value flexibility. They protect future options. Paying that kind of price would represent a philosophical shift, not just a roster move. And yet, the dilemma is obvious. Zubac would be a significant upgrade. He is not a floor spacer, but he controls the paint. He defends. He brings playoff reliability. In a conference loaded with size and physicality, that kind of presence changes matchups immediately. So Boston is stuck in the middle of 2 competing realities. On one side, patient, trusting internal development, waiting for Tatum, protecting future assets. On the other, opportunity, a chance to stabilize the roster now and signal that this season is not just about survival, but contention. What if the season Boston was supposed to sacrifice is quietly forcing the front office into uncomfortable choices? Against nearly every preseason projection, the Celtics are winning. 15 victories, 9 defeats, 3rd place in the Eastern Conference. All of this without Jayson Tatum on the court. What was labeled a gap year is starting to look like something else entirely, and that changes everything. The original plan was clear. Tatum would miss most of the season recovering from an Achilles injury. The roster would reset financially. Jrue Holiday, gone. Kristaps Porzingis, gone. No pressure to chase short-term success, just survive, evaluate, and move forward. But the team did not follow the script. Boston is competing nightly, staying relevant, beating teams that were supposed to be ahead of them. And when reality shifts like this, so does the trade conversation. Now the question is no longer if the Celtics should stay patient. It is whether patience is still logical. When fans talk about big men on the trade block, the headlines jump to Giannis Antetokounmpo or Anthony Davis. Those names grab attention, but they are not realistic paths. Not financially, not structurally. Boston knows that. The more interesting discussion lives one tier below. And one name keeps surfacing: Daniel Gafford. According to a mock trade scenario floated by Hardwood Houdini, Boston could target Gafford in a 3-team framework before Tatum's eventual return. In this hypothetical deal, the Celtics would land Gafford and Haywood Highsmith. The cost would be meaningful. Anthony Simons would be sent to Brooklyn, along with multiple second-round picks. Dallas would receive Zaire Williams, Cam Thomas, and a future first-round selection. This is where things get complicated. Simmons was the headline acquisition of the offseason, a $100 million sharpshooter brought in during a turbulent summer. But around the league, there has always been skepticism about his long-term future in Boston, his contract, his timeline, his fit once Tatum returned. That makes him valuable now. Gafford, on the other hand, represents stability, experience, reliability. He is not flashy, but he produces. During his time with Washington, he consistently stayed on the floor. Last season with the Mavericks, he posted career highs in scoring while maintaining his identity as a rim protector.